A rare blue supermoon is rising tonight, and experts say it will be the biggest and brightest full moon of this year and will not be visible again, that is, until the year 2037. So what exactly is a blue supermoon? What would be the best way to observe it? And speaking of the moon, what are the implications of India's recent successful landing on the moon's south pole? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Today we revisit the race to space among nations worldwide amid news of a rare blue supermoon later this evening. For more on this, I have Professor Paul Yun at Camino College joining me live from the US. Professor Yun, it's been a while. Welcome back, and it's great to speak to you again.
Good to see you.
I also have Dr. Kang Sung-ju at the Gwacheon National Science Museum live on the line as well. Dr. Kang, welcome back.
Thank you for having me again.
Right, Professor Yun, for the sake of lay people, including me, let's begin with a simple definition of the phrase a super blue moon.
Okay, so we know that supermoon kind of large or something special, right? So we know that the orbit of the Earth is not circle. It is elliptical shape, which is an oval shape. So we know that when object is close to us, it looks larger. So when moon is very close to us, when you get a full moon, then it's get really large and bright. So we call it a supermoon. Then what is a blue moon? August 1st, this month, we had a full moon. It takes 29.5 days moon to make a one orbiting. So August 30 and 31st, we have another full moon. So when you get a given 1 month, when you have a two full moon, the second one is called blue moon. Blue moon, that doesn't mean it's a blue. But rather it's because it's called some historical reason. People call it the second full moon. That's one given month. We call it blue moon. So when this thing happened tonight, I hope all the audience have a chance to go outside tonight to watch it. Then look at the night sky, and both of the super and blue happen. So we call it super blue moon.
Right, I see. And Dr. Kang, for those of us here in the country who are hoping to see this super blue moon, when and how would be the best way of indulging in its sight?
Because the moon is the brightest celestial object in the sky, it can be viewed at any time and from any location during this night. Of course, the most important requirement is that the weather should cooperate. While the chances of witnessing a super blue moon are quite strong in the central region, such as the Seoul and Gyeonggi province, but other portions of the country may be cloudy or wet. If the weather cooperates, then find where you have an unobstructed view. You should be able to see then this year's largest moon.
Right, and Dr. Kang, if we miss the opportunity this time around, when can we indulge in its sight next time?
If you miss this one, the next super blue moon will be sighted in 2037, which is 14 years from now. In general, supermoons appear almost every year, but blue moons occur in every 2 to 3 years. So each case is not that rare, but super blue moon, where the two overlap, are less common, occurring once every 10 years on average. The most recent one was back in 2018, I guess.
Right, I see. Well, so for those of us here in the country, we can indulge in its sight later this Thursday evening then. Moving forward, Professor Yun, last week India made history by becoming the first nation to land near the moon's south pole. That being said, Professor Yun, could you tell us a bit more about the significance of this particular stride into space by India?
India's around 1960 and 70s, the lunar mission was mainly dominated by United States and then former Soviet Unions. And then 2019, China landed on the far side of the moon. So these three countries were very dominating the lunar missions. The significance of India's success landing on the South Pole means now India is standing on another very global leading of the lunar missions. So that's very significant. In our Artemis program, the NASA's led and then international partners of collaboration lunar missions, we are planning to send human to the South Pole. We try to build the habitations on the South Pole throughout the Artemis program. The India's the lunar rovers will give us a lot of information that makes more Artemis program planning out will be more plausible. So, and then we know that not only the India, but also Japan also plan to send lander to the moon. So we know that now moon has more, getting more attentions from all over the world. And then I think it's more countries will join to the moon, including Korea. So it's very exciting. We humans, our people that we're heading to the moon, we are opening the door of the new space era.
Right, indeed. And staying with India's efforts, Dr. Kang, foreign media claim that India was able to land on the moon this time around without breaking the bank, to quote that is. What more can you tell us about India's cost-effective mission?
I was really surprised that Chandrayaan-3 mission cost only $74 million, which is equivalent to the 10 billion Korean won, which is less than the $200 million cost of the recently failed Luna 25 from Russia mission, or the $433 million cost of the NASA's Viper rover, which is scheduled to launch the moon in 2024. It was even less expensive than the blockbuster space film like Gravity, The Martian, or The Interstellar, which cost way more than $100 million. Many people have asked how this was possible, but the ISRO has yet to provide an answer. We do not know what went into the $74 million budget because ISRO, India's counterpart of the NASA, hasn't disclosed any financial data, but the low price tag can be justified in the part of the mission's limited size and scope, as well as the fact that it was a redo mission of the prior journey, Chandrayaan-1 and Chandrayaan-2. So perhaps India's main strategy for saving money on the moon was to keep the spacecraft small and maybe not counting prior missions, I believe.
Right, I see. Dr. Kang, India has also shared plans to send people to the moon in the near future. And what would be the broader implications of this ambitious goal, if successful, that is?
The United States is still the only country to have sent a human to the moon, demonstrating how tough it is to send a human to the moon, which is the nearest celestial body to us. If India successfully launched its first manned space flight into the low Earth orbit in 2024, which is next year, that should be a starting point. And then it would have built the basis for a moon mission, lunar mission, and demonstrated that India can truly become a significant space club, joining the United States, Russia, and China as a space-leading industrialization nations.
Right. Professor Yoon, just days before India's own success, Russia marked failure in a similar mission, despite being the first nation to ever succeed in a lunar landing, I believe back in the year 1959. How do you explain Russia's recent failure?
The most recent interview, the Secretary General of the Russian Space Agency, Roscosmos, said that 47 years of gap since their last mission, 1976. They lost also expertise. They think that's too much gap was the reason why they failed. But there's another reason I think I see personally. After Ukraine war, last year, the European agency was planning to part of this Lunar 25 mission, but they withdrew. And also there was a aerospace sector sanction against Russia. I think that's all contribute why Russia has lack of expertise. Withdrew the European international partner, and then aerospace sector sanction against Russia. I think that's all accumulate increase the risk for Russia's failed mission to the lunar missions.
Right. And what about you, Dr. Kang? How do you explain Russia's recent failure? I mean, what does that tell you about the state of Russia's space program?
As Professor Yoon says, that Luna 25 was Russia's lunar expedition, and it came about 47 years after the previous lunar mission, which was Luna 24 in 1976. Russia led the world's space industry until a few years ago, but as Professor Yoon says, that with the sanction based on the current Russian-Ukrainian war, it's safe to assume that the Russia's space industry has plummeted. And even the Baikonur Cosmodrome, which served as Russia's major launch facility, has been taken by the Kazakh government. It is acceptable to assume that the failure of the Luna 25 mission was also due to the fact that about after 47 years of no lunar missions, a lot of preparation was required, but it failed because it was pushed by the schedules of India's Lunar South Pole mission without being prepared and completed. With the loss of the Luna 25 mission, many Western countries have begun to question Russia's space industry technology, and if the Russian-Ukrainian war continues, the Russian space business will very suffer.
Right, and Professor Yoon, how do you explain this latest race among nations here on Earth to the moon's south pole? And I'm talking about countries, of course, like India, Russia, China, and the US.
Yeah, so each countries, we know South Pole is getting a lot of attention. One of the main reasons is because we found there's a water. So water means it's very most important resource because when you send a human, we need to breathe. So we could extract oxygen from water, H2O, which all stand for oxygen. Also, we could use for water, we need to drink it to send the human mission there. Furthermore, we could use hydrogen and oxygen for fuel for the rocket in space exploration. So it's like our energy. So water should be one of the most important resources to explore further into space. So that's why all these major leading space countries are focusing on the South Pole. So now we know that Russia fails this time, but they are planning to send at least 3 more missions to South Pole next 7 years. And then they're planning to thinking about sending manned mission with China. That's what they're discussing. China, we know that 2019, they're the first country landing far side of the moon, and that their rovers are still active on the surface of the moon. As far as I know, that's the only active the rover beside the most recent India's the Chandrayaan rovers. So, and then China is also plan to send the rover to South Pole year 2026. And then, of course, NASA plans to send land humans on the moon 2025. So it's getting a lot of attention from international competitors. And why? Because it's going to be the launching board for deeper space, including Mars and beyond. So I think we'll see more engagement from all these different active player. And I'm pretty sure also Korea will join around 2030. So let's see how it goes.
Right, of course. And against this fierce competition for space exploration among countries, Dr. Kang, simply speaking, what are the broader gains of greater advances in space exploration for any country?
Because space exploration is anticipated to be the next great thing, the world's space exploration will be dominated by a few countries with the developed space industries. Because the space sector, like military technology, is highly classified, it is unavoidable the space advanced countries will lead the way in the space industry. Latecomers such as Korea can gain experience and enhance their technology by working on missions with a sophisticated space country. The one good example will be the Artemis Accords are a good illustration of this, and Western developed countries such as Europe and the United States are currently the most advanced, but China's technology progress is equally significant. So the field of the space exploration will be reformed around the United States and China in the future, and the assistance of the many countries will achieve significant results in establishing a new order.
Right, I see. Professor Yoon, earlier on you talked about how neighboring Japan is also seeking to advance its lunar mission. What more can you tell us about Japan?
So I think it's not well known about Japan's accomplishments. Let me briefly say, after 1976, Russia, Soviet Union stopped their lunar missions. It was Japan, 1990, coming to a lunar mission success, 1990, using their own rocket. In 2017, Japan sent their main orbiter and then two small satellites. They were successful using their own rockets. So we know they're very capable space-bearing countries. And then what we need to know is Japan recently increased their commercial partner go to lunar mission. So Japan's iSpace with an Israeli partner, they tried to land on the moon last year. They were very close. They failed it, but they're very aggressively commercial partners going to Japanese commercial partners are going to moon too. In international partners' perspective, NASA and Japan has a very strong collaboration. Japan has been very active collaborators in International Space Station. They are operating their own module, and they're one of the leading countries in the space of biomedical experiments. And then Japan will be a very important partner building Lunar Gateway, which is a very small size international space station orbiting the moon. Japan will work on building international habitations. And then NASA agrees taking Japan's astronaut to the moon using Space Launch System and Orion capsule. And then furthermore, Japan is working with, they're one of the leading, their business partner, Toyota, building lunar cruiser. So in many aspects, in business-wise and international collaboration-wise, Japan is a definitely global leaders. And I hope that I want to see more collaboration between also Korea and Japan coming years.
Right, I see. Well, that's good to know. Dr. Kang, space missions, I'm sure, are challenging to say the least. But specifically speaking, what makes a lunar landing difficult?
In fact, while sending an orbiter to orbit the moon is not particularly difficult with current technology, but the problem is landing a spacecraft on the lunar surface is quite challenging. Prior to the Chinese landing on the lunar surface back in 2013, the last time was landed on the moon was 1976. Therefore, we haven't been on the moon in nearly 40 years. And when an experienced employees quits from each country, it's like having to recreate the key assets. And despite the fact that the distance between the Earth and the Moon is quite critical, maneuvering is difficult due to the communication delay. So once the landing technique is in place, landing sequence is in place, the control room has very little power. Their ambiguity of the lunar surface, and though we can picture it with a remarkable precision, making landing on the moon difficult because we know the Luna 25 crashed due to a glitch in the landing program caused by the inaccurate lunar surface inputs, demonstrating that landing on the moon is a significant issue. So that's a pretty difficult techniques.
Right, I see. Professor Yoon, so as we've mentioned then, India is the first country to have landed on the moon's south pole. That being said, Professor Yoon, can it claim sovereignty?
That's a very good question. 1967, there was a UN-led outer space treaties. So if I summarize one of the few of the detail is 91 countries ratified, which means they sign and consent, include no country will claim sovereignty on celestial body, including moon. And also it says that no country will place any nuclear weapons on the celestial body or outer space. And then all those celestial body must be explored peaceful purpose. And then every country must be reliable for any damage they're doing in the space and environments. So which countries signed that treaty? It includes former Soviet Union, United States, Western European countries, Korea, Japan, and India. Therefore, India says they're not going to claim sovereignty on the moon. So I guess we don't need to worry about it.
Right, I see. And speaking about Korea, Dr. Kang, perhaps we can end today's edition with where Korea stands with regard to its own moon mission.
South Korea is also pursuing space exploration plans to the moon based on its space technology capabilities. The Korean version of the NASA Kari launched its first lunar probe, Danuri. We know that it's orbiting routine lunar missions that has been extended for an additional 2 years due to its good observation and capabilities and fewer reserves. So South Korea intends to recreate a next-generation launch vehicle to replace Nuri, and it will be used for deliver a lunar lander by 2032. So we will send a lunar lander and unmanned rover by 2032. That's our current plan.
Right, that's a very ambitious plan right there. What are the prospects, Dr. Kang? Do you suppose it will be successful? Very briefly speaking. Hopefully.
Yes.
We'll keep our
yes.
fingers crossed for that then.
Yes, I
All
believe
right.
so.
Right. Dr. Kang, as always, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts. And Professor Yoon over in the US, thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Well, for those of you here in Korea, the rare super blue moon will be visible tonight. Happy sighting and thank you for watching.